Why did Nashville fire its own Grand Ole Opry star and let him end up shining shoes for a living? A story the Opry has never fully owned up to. Welcome to 71 Dumbest Things About Nashville. That country songs never mention, where we're exposing the history. Music City doesn't put on postcards. Like the city's first residents living in an actual cave, a Nashville man who became president of another country, and the segregated laws still hiding behind the neon of Broadway. We're separating real Nashville history from the tourist brochure version, so hit subscribe before we get into it. 1. Christmas Eve in Nashville used to mean something brutal instead of festive. Settlers spent that freezing night hacking through ice on the Cumberland River instead of opening presents. They dragged wagons and terrified children across the frozen water toward a half-built fort in 1779. There were no stockings and no eggnog waiting for them. Just shivering pioneers praying the ice held while wolves howled somewhere in the darkness. That miserable holiday crossing became the actual birth of Music City. Nashville literally started with suffering instead of singing. 2. Tennessee somehow managed to be both last and first in the same war. The state dragged its feet longer than almost every other southern state before finally seceding from the Union in 1861. It joined the Confederacy almost reluctantly compared to its fiery neighbors down south. Yet once the war ended, Tennessee flipped the entire script. It became the very first former Confederate state allowed back into the Union in 1866. That fast return let Tennessee skip the harsher Reconstruction rules that punished everyone else for years afterward. 3. Nicaragua once had an American president and Nashville built him. William Walker grew up in Music City before becoming one of the strangest figures in American history. He led a private army south and somehow seized control of Nicaragua, declaring himself president in 1856. Locals watched a Tennessee lawyer turned mercenary rule their country like it was his own personal experiment. His reign did not last long before rival forces and his own arrogance brought him down completely. He remains the only American citizen who ever became head of state of another nation entirely. 4. Prohibition tried to dry out Nashville, but Printer's Alley simply refused to listen. When Tennessee banned bar liquor sales owners in the famous alley, did not panic, they got creative instead. They rebranded their bars as private clubs and kept pouring drinks like nothing had changed at all. Customers technically became members overnight just to keep the good times rolling legally on paper. Police and lawmakers knew exactly what was happening the whole time. The loophole worked so well that Printer's Alley became legendary for outsmarting its own state government one shot at a time. 5. The Ryman Auditorium started life screaming about sin instead of playing country hits. A former riverboat gambler named Tom Ryman got so moved by a fiery preacher, he built an entire tabernacle for religious revivals instead. Thousands packed inside seeking salvation decades before anyone dreamed of the Grand Ole Opry taking over the stage. Gospel singing and preaching filled those wooden pews long before guitars and rhinestones ever showed up. The gambler, turned believer, never imagined his house of worship would become the most famous music venue in American history. 6. Nashville built a full-sized ancient Greek temple and then decided to go even bigger inside it. The Parthenon replica houses a 42-foot-tall statue that towers over every visitor who walks through the doors. It stands as the tallest indoor sculpture anywhere in the entire Western Hemisphere, completely dwarfing expectations. Tourists expecting a quiet history lesson instead find themselves staring up at a golden giant surrounded by columns. Athens never had anything quite this dramatic sitting inside a public park in the middle of Tennessee. 7. Nashville nearly drowned, and barely anyone outside the state noticed at all. A brutal flood in 2010 dumped over a foot of rain across the city within just 2 days straight. Streets turned into rivers' homes, filled with water, and downtown businesses were left ruined almost overnight. Billions of dollars in damage piled up while national news outlets stayed strangely quiet about the disaster. Residents watched their city go underwater and wondered why the rest of the country barely seemed to blink. Nashville rebuilt itself largely without the spotlight anyone else would have received. 8. Tennessee earned its nickname by showing up when nobody else wanted to fight. During the War of 1812, an overwhelming number of Tennesseans rushed to volunteer for military service almost immediately. Officials were stunned by how many ordinary citizens dropped everything to grab muskets and march off to battle. That flood of eager fighters gave the state a reputation that stuck permanently in American memory. From that moment forward, Tennessee proudly carried the title of the volunteer state. Turns out, enthusiasm for war became one of the state's earliest claims to fame. 9. Nashville is named after a man who never actually visited the place. General Francis Nash fought bravely during the Revolutionary War, earning respect from soldiers and officers alike. He died from wounds suffered in battle long before the city bearing his name even existed. Settlers later honored his sacrifice by naming their new frontier outpost after him, despite him never setting foot there. Generations of Nashvillians have lived and died in a city named for a stranger who fell hundreds of miles away. 10. Nashville earned a grim milestone that most Confederate capitals desperately wanted to avoid. The city became the very first Confederate state capital captured by Union troops back in February 1862. Soldiers marched in and took control while residents watched their government collapse practically overnight. That early defeat sent shockwaves through the Confederacy, signaling just how vulnerable the South truly was. Nashville spent the rest of the war under Union occupation long before most Southern cities faced that same fate. 11. A bombing in Nashville sparked one of the most powerful silent protests in civil rights history. Attorney Z. Alexander Luby had spent years defending student activists fighting against segregation across the city. In 1960, his home was blown apart in an attack meant to terrify him into silence completely. Instead, thousands of furious Nashvillians marched together in total silence straight to City Hall, demanding answers. Mayor Ben West stood before that massive crowd and publicly admitted segregation was simply morally wrong. That bombing backfired spectacularly, becoming a turning point for desegregation across the entire city. 12. A self-taught Nashville artist broke barriers that most trained painters could only dream about. William Edmondson spent years carving limestone sculptures in his backyard without any formal art education whatsoever. Museum curators eventually noticed his raw, powerful work and invited him to display it in New York. He became the first African-American artist ever given a solo exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art. Critics were stunned that such extraordinary talent came from a man carving stone in his own yard. Nashville quietly produced one of America's most groundbreaking sculptors almost by accident. 13. Elvis left behind more than just hit records inside a Nashville recording studio. He cut over 200 songs at RCA Studio B, turning it into a legendary hit-making machine for decades. Engineers and musicians packed into that small room, chasing perfect takes late into countless nights. Somewhere along the way, Christmas lights got strung up around the studio for a festive session. Elvis apparently loved them so much he refused to let anyone take them down afterward. Those lights reportedly still hang there today, long after the king himself is gone. 14. A candy bar invented in Nashville quietly changed snacking forever before anyone else caught on. Back in 1912, a local company created the Goo Goo Cluster, combining chocolate, caramel, marshmallow, and peanuts into one bar. Nothing quite like it existed anywhere in America. At the time it hit store shelves. Decades would pass before Snickers or other combination candy bars ever showed up to compete. Nashville essentially invented an entire category of candy without anyone outside the South fully realizing it. Locals still consider it a point of sweet, stubborn pride today. 15. Middle Tennessee got hit with a deadly disaster right before the whole world shut down. On March 3, 2020, a violent tornado outbreak tore through neighborhoods, leaving destruction and grief scattered everywhere. Homes were flattened, lives were lost, and entire communities were left picking through rubble in shock. Just weeks later, COVID lockdowns began, forcing survivors to rebuild while also facing a global pandemic simultaneously. Nashville residents barely had time to grieve one disaster before another completely different crisis arrived. It became one of the cruelest one-two punches the city has ever endured. 16. Nashville has a law that makes teenagers sound like criminal masterminds for playing pinball. anyone under 18 is technically forbidden from playing pinball machines anywhere within city limits. That is because officials once classified the machines as gambling devices, rather than harmless arcade fun. Somewhere a kid probably got scolded for tilting a machine like they were running an illegal casino. The rule sounds absurd today, but it stuck around anyway without ever getting updated. Nashville remains one of the few places where pinball carries an actual legal age restriction. 17. Nashville's earliest settlers basically had to invent their own government, because nobody else had gotten around to it. Tennessee did not legally exist as a territory, yet leaving them with zero official rules to follow. So they sat down and wrote their own set of laws known as the Cumberland Compact instead. Ordinary pioneers essentially became lawmakers overnight, just to keep their tiny frontier settlement from falling apart completely. It was democracy improvised out of pure necessity rather than any grand political vision. That homemade rulebook helped hold the fledgling community together until real government eventually arrived. 18. A future president once ran Nashville like his own personal military command post. Andrew Johnson served as military governor of Tennessee years before ever imagining he would reach the White House. He enforced Union control over the city with an iron grip during some of its darkest wartime years. Locals dealt directly with a man who would later become one of America's most controversial presidents. Nobody in Nashville at the time could have predicted where his political career was actually headed. His time running the city was just a strange practice round for the presidency itself. 19. The Grand Ole Opry's first black star ended up shining shoes instead of shining on stage. DeFord Bailey became one of the Opry's most beloved early performers, thrilling audiences with his harmonica skills. Despite his popularity, he was abruptly fired in 1941, under circumstances that left fans confused and heartbroken. He struggled afterward, eventually working as a shoe shiner just to make ends meet in Nashville. The man who once packed houses with his talent spent years polishing shoes instead of performing music. His story remains one of country music's most painful forgotten chapters. 20. Nashville apparently needed a very specific law to stop residents from keeping cheetahs as pets. It is currently illegal to own a pet cheetah anywhere within the city limits of Nashville. Somewhere down the line, lawmakers clearly decided regular house pets were not exotic enough for some residents. One can only imagine what prompted officials to write such a wildly specific piece of legislation. Someone somewhere probably tried walking a cheetah down the street before this rule existed. Nashville remains proof that even the strangest laws usually come from an even stranger true story. 21. Some of the biggest hits in music history were played by musicians nobody ever knew by name. A tight-knit group of Nashville session players earned the nickname the Nashville A-Team for their incredible skill. They played on countless chart-topping records across multiple decades without ever getting credited on the actual labels. Millions of fans sang along to songs without realizing the same handful of musicians built the sound behind them. These unsung players shaped the entire Nashville sound while staying almost completely invisible to the public. Their fingerprints are on more hits than most famous names combined. 22. Nashville's tallest building looks like it was designed by a comic book fan with a construction permit. The skyscraper features two pointed spires rising dramatically into the skyline above downtown. Locals immediately nicknamed it the Batman Building because the shape resembles the superhero's iconic cowl. Tourists now snap photos convinced Gotham City secretly relocated to Middle Tennessee. Architects probably had serious artistic intentions, but nobody in Nashville cared once the nickname stuck. The building remains one of the most recognizable and oddly named skyscrapers in the entire country. 23. An entire ancient civilization in Middle Tennessee vanished, and nobody left behind a clear explanation why. Archaeological evidence shows thriving Mississippian-era settlements once dotted the region for generations before disappearing almost completely. By around 1500, those communities were gone, with drought and warfare considered the most likely culprits. Researchers still piece together fragments of pottery and mounds, trying to understand what really happened. An entire society rose and collapsed in Tennessee, centuries before any settler ever arrived. Nashville sits on ground that holds far older mysteries than most residents realize. 24. A single radio show in Nashville has been running longer than almost anything else broadcast in America. The Grand Ole Opry first hit the airwaves in 1925 and simply never stopped since then. Generations of performers and fans have tuned in weekly through war's economic collapse and massive cultural change. It remains the longest continuously running live radio broadcast anywhere on the entire planet. Somehow, through every decade of chaos, this one Nashville stage kept the lights on and the music playing. That kind of staying power turned a local broadcast into a genuine American institution. 25. Andrew Jackson's grand Nashville estate hid a brutal truth behind its polished columns and green fields. The Hermitage was built and maintained almost entirely through the forced labor of around 100 enslaved people. Visitors today walk through preserved rooms and gardens shaped by hands that were never given freedom or credit. Jackson's wealth and comfort depended completely on people who had no choice in the matter whatsoever. The mansion's beauty stands in sharp contrast to the suffering required to build and sustain it. Nashville's most famous historic home carries a history far darker than its postcard image suggests. 26. One battle outside Nashville essentially ended a Confederate Army's ability to keep fighting at all. The 1864 Battle of Nashville crushed the Confederacy's Army of Tennessee in a devastating and decisive defeat. Union forces overwhelmed their lines, leaving thousands dead, wounded, or captured within a shockingly short amount of time. What remained of that once formidable army limped away, completely unable to mount any serious resistance again. Confederate leadership watched their Western hopes collapse almost entirely on the outskirts of Nashville itself. The battle marked one of the most lopsided turning points of the entire Civil War. 27. Nashville built its entire identity around country music, yet technically stole the credit from somewhere else. Bristol, sitting right on the Tennessee-Virginia line, officially holds the title as the true birthplace of country music. Early recording sessions there captured pioneering artists years before Nashville ever became the genre's dominant hub. Music City eventually absorbed the spotlight through radio labels and sheer marketing muscle over the following decades. Bristol never quite got the same fame despite technically starting the whole movement first. Nashville simply out-hustled the town that actually deserves the historical bragging rights. 28. Christmas morning in downtown Nashville turned into chaos when an explosion rocked one of its oldest streets. In 2020, a bombing tore through 2nd Avenue, damaging dozens of historic buildings within a matter of seconds. Residents woke up expecting a quiet holiday and instead found shattered windows and collapsed storefronts scattered everywhere. Investigators later pieced together details of the attack, while the city struggled to process the sudden destruction. Buildings that had survived over a century of history were suddenly left crumbling on a holiday morning. Nashville's historic downtown bore the scars of that bizarre and unsettling Christmas day. 29. Nashville quietly stripped down its own sound just to make it more palatable for mainstream radio. The Nashville sound was deliberately engineered to remove fiddles and steel guitar from traditional country recordings entirely. Producers wanted smoother, polished tracks capable of competing directly with pop songs dominating the charts at the time. Traditional country fans were furious watching their raw, twangy sound get replaced by lush orchestral arrangements instead. The strategy worked commercially, even as purists accused Nashville of abandoning its own musical roots completely. That controversial shift reshaped the entire direction of country music for decades afterward. 30. The Country Music Hall of Fame hid a musical secret inside its own architectural blueprint. Architects designed the building so that when viewed from above, it forms the unmistakable shape of a bass clef. Visitors walking through the halls have no idea they are standing inside a giant musical symbol. Only aerial photographs or building plans actually reveal the clever design hidden in plain sight. It stands as a subtle tribute to the very music the entire building was built to celebrate. Nashville managed to turn architecture itself into one more quiet love letter to music. 31. A giant peace sign mowed into a field near Nashville's airport baffled travelers for over a decade before anyone knew the truth. pilots and passengers repeatedly spotted the massive symbol carved into the grass while flying in and out of the city. Theories spread about secret messages, hippie protests, or some strange local prank nobody could quite explain. The mystery lingered for years until a maintenance worker finally admitted he had simply made it himself. Turns out there was no grand conspiracy, just one guy with a mower and way too much time. Nashville's biggest aerial mystery ended with the most anticlimactic confession imaginable. 32. Nashville's most famous dish was allegedly born out of pure jealousy and revenge rather than culinary ambition. As legend goes, a woman drenched her cheating boyfriend's breakfast in blistering hot spices, hoping to punish him thoroughly. Instead of storming off in pain, he reportedly loved it and asked for more the very next morning. That spiteful plate somehow evolved into hot chicken, now considered one of Nashville's proudest culinary exports worldwide. Tourists line up for hours today, completely unaware they are eating something originally meant as punishment. Revenge has rarely tasted quite this delicious or become quite this famous. 33. A pair of polar bear statues from a long-shuttered custard shop have been mysteriously relocating around Nashville for almost a century. The original shop closed decades ago, yet its beloved bear statues somehow never actually disappeared from the city. Residents have quietly moved them from yard to yard, treating them like a strange, ongoing neighborhood tradition. Nobody claims full ownership, yet everyone seems to know roughly where the bears currently reside at any given time. It has become an unofficial scavenger hunt passed down through generations of amused locals. Nashville turned two forgotten ice cream statues into a genuine urban legend. 34. A single-family farm quietly shaped what eventually became one of Nashville's most beloved attractions. The Nashville Zoo now sits on Grassmere, a property worked by the same family for roughly 200 years straight. Generations tended crops and livestock on that land long before any exotic animals ever set foot there. Eventually, the family transformed their farm into protected parkland, ensuring its history would never be paved over completely. Visitors today, wandering past giraffes and tigers, rarely realize they are standing on 2 centuries of farming legacy. Nashville's zoo grew directly out of one family's stubborn refusal to let their land disappear. 35. A group of formerly enslaved students saved their struggling school by singing their way across the entire world. Fisk University's Jubilee Singers set out on a risky tour, hoping their voices could raise desperately needed funds. Audiences across America and Europe were moved to tears, including royalty, who rarely gave American performers any attention at all. Queen Victoria herself was reportedly so impressed, she requested a private performance from the traveling group of singers. Their tour succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, rescuing the university from financial collapse entirely through sheer talent. Nashville's Fisk University survived because its students refused to let their school simply disappear. 36. A national scandal exposed just how much money was secretly buying airtime for certain songs across America. The payola scandal of 1959 and 1960 revealed radio disc jockeys accepting cash bribes to push specific records. Some of those implicated DJs had direct ties to Nashville's growing and increasingly powerful music industry machine. Investigations rattled the entire radio business, forcing stations to rethink how songs actually reached listeners' ears. Artists and fans alike were left wondering how many hits were genuinely popular versus simply purchased outright. Nashville's music scene got a harsh public lesson in how the industry really operated behind closed doors. 37. One of Nashville's earliest residents apparently preferred living inside a literal cave rather than a proper house. Timothy Demonbrun settled along the Cumberland River and reportedly raised his family inside a cave carved into a bluff. It sounds like the setup for a survival show, yet it was simply everyday frontier life at the time. Demonbrun became known as something of a local legend for his unconventional choice of permanent residence. That cave still exists today, marked as one of the oldest known dwellings connected to the city's founding. Nashville's earliest housing market apparently included at least one very literal rock-bottom option. 38. A blind Vanderbilt student changed life for visually impaired Americans after bringing home an idea from overseas. He traveled abroad, and discovered guide dog training programs that simply did not exist anywhere in the United States yet. Inspired by what he witnessed, he returned to Nashville determined to build something similar for others like himself. His efforts led to the founding of the first seeing eye dog school anywhere in the entire country. What started as one student's personal frustration turned into a program that transformed independence for countless people afterward. Nashville quietly became the birthplace of a movement most Americans never realized started there. 39. Nashville. National Cemetery holds a staggering number of soldiers who never made it home after defending the city. Established in 1866, the cemetery now contains the graves of more than 16,000 Union soldiers. Rows upon rows of matching headstones stretch across the grounds representing lives cut short during brutal wartime fighting. Visitors walking through often fall silent, realizing the sheer scale of loss required to secure the city. Each stone represents a soldier who left home and never returned to see peace restored again. Nashville's peaceful cemetery today stands as a quiet reminder of just how costly that victory truly was. 40. A hotel that no longer exists somehow left behind one of America's most famous coffee slogans anyway. Legend claims Theodore Roosevelt tasted coffee at Nashville's Maxwell House Hotel and declared it good to the last drop. Whether he actually said those exact words remains debated among historians who love picking apart presidential folklore. Regardless, the phrase stuck around, becoming one of the most recognizable advertising slogans in American history. The hotel itself eventually closed and vanished from the city entirely, yet the slogan lived on forever. Nashville lost a historic hotel, but somehow kept its accidental contribution to coffee marketing immortalized. 41. Belle Meade. Plantation bred a horse so fast it made history on foreign soil, despite America's rocky reputation abroad. The plantation produced the first American-born horse ever to win England's prestigious Derby, stunning skeptical British racing crowds. Behind that championship bloodline stood enslaved workers whose labor and expertise made the entire breeding operation possible in the first place. Their skill with horses went completely uncredited, even as the plantation's reputation soared across international racing circles. Visitors touring the grounds today learn about championship bloodlines while confronting the darker truth behind their creation. Nashville's proudest racing legacy was built entirely on labor nobody ever properly acknowledged. 42. Tennessee's Capitol building was designed by a man who loved his creation a little too literally. Architect William Strickland grew so attached to the building he arranged to be entombed inside its own walls after death. Visitors today walk past his resting place without necessarily realizing the building's designer never truly left it behind. It remains one of the strangest architect burials in the entire country, hidden inside a working government building. Lawmakers debate policy every day, just steps away from the man who dreamed up the structure around them. Nashville's Capitol quietly doubles as both government headquarters and one architect's permanent final resting place. 43. Long before she became a media legend, a teenage Oprah Winfrey was already working behind a Nashville microphone. She landed a job at WVOL, a black-owned radio station, where she began sharpening the skills that would define her future career. Listeners tuning in had no idea they were hearing the early voice of someone destined to become a household name worldwide. That small station gave her a platform to practice storytelling and connection, long before television ever entered the picture. Nashville unknowingly hosted the earliest chapter of one of the most influential media careers in American history. A teenager behind a local mic quietly became a global icon. 44. Tennessee's earliest known residents were not a single unified group, but several distinct nations spread across the land. At least 7 separate indigenous nations, including the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Yuchi, and Shawnee, called the region home long before settlers arrived. Each nation carried its own language, traditions, and territory, shaping the land in ways later history books often flattened into one story. Trade routes, hunting grounds, and villages crisscrossed the region for centuries before any European ever stepped foot there. Nashville sits on ground with a far more complex and diverse indigenous history than most modern visitors realize. the city's true origin story stretches back long before its official founding. 45. A single Nashville factory quietly became the beating heart of vinyl records for the entire continent. United Record Pressing grew into North America's largest vinyl plant, churning out records for artists spanning wildly different genres and eras. Motown classics, modern pop hits, and everything in between have physically passed through this one unassuming Nashville facility. Music fans holding their favorite vinyl records rarely realize how many of them trace back to this single pressing plant. It became an unofficial backstage pass to nearly every major moment in recorded music history. Nashville's fingerprints are pressed directly into millions of records around the world. 46. Nashville's grand old train station nearly rotted away before getting a second life nobody saw coming. Union Station opened as an impressive depot, welcoming travelers arriving by rail into the heart of the city. As train travel declined, the building sat abandoned for years, slowly falling apart and forgotten by most residents. Eventually, developers stepped in and transformed the crumbling depot into a stylish hotel instead of tearing it down completely. Guests today check into rooms inside a building that once echoed with train whistles rather than room service calls. Nashville managed to save a piece of history by completely reinventing its purpose. 47. Nashville's earliest settlers built walls not for decoration, but because survival genuinely depended on it. Following the Revolutionary War, the fledgling settlement faced repeated attacks forcing residents to fortify their community for basic protection. Constant threats pushed them to construct a stockade designed to keep danger out while daily frontier life continued inside its walls. Families lived under constant tension, knowing safety was never fully guaranteed, even within their own newly built settlement. That defensive structure became essential infrastructure rather than an optional addition to the growing frontier outpost. Nashville's earliest days were shaped as much by fear as by ambition. 48. Nashville's skyline hides an entire industry most tourists completely overlook while snapping photos of honky-tonks. Scattered throughout downtown cite numerous denominational headquarters and religious publishing houses quietly operating behind unremarkable office buildings. These institutions print and distribute religious materials, reaching congregations across the entire country from offices most visitors walk straight past. While tourists focus on neon signs and live music, religious publishing has quietly remained one of Nashville's major industries for generations. Few realize Music City doubles as a significant hub for the American religious publishing world. Nashville's identity extends far beyond guitars and boots into pews and pulpits nationwide. 49. An American flag nickname that everyone recognizes actually traces back to one Nashville sea captain's personal ship banner. Captain William Driver named his own flag Old Glory long before the phrase became attached to the entire national flag itself. He reportedly cherished that particular flag through numerous voyages, eventually settling in Nashville, where the story took root permanently. Over time, his personal nickname spread until Americans everywhere began referring to the national flag using his original phrase. Few people reciting the nickname today realize it originated with one sailor's deep personal attachment to his own banner. Nashville quietly gave America one of its most patriotic nicknames. 50. Nashville waited an oddly long time before officially becoming Tennessee's permanent seat of government. Despite functioning as an important settlement for decades, the city was not named the state's permanent capital until 1843. That decision came more than 60 years after the original fort was first built along the Cumberland River. Lawmakers debated and shuffled the capital designation between multiple cities before finally settling on Nashville for good. Residents had already been building a thriving community long before the government made its choice official on paper. Nashville proved its worth long before any title made it legally permanent. 51. Nashville existed for decades before it technically became a real city on paper. The settlement was not officially incorporated as a city until 1806, nearly 3 decades after its original founding. Residents had already been living, working, and building a community there long before any official paperwork made it legal. Local government structures had to catch up to a population that had already been thriving on its own for years. That delay meant Nashville operated almost like an unofficial frontier town for an oddly long stretch of time. The city proved itself functional long before bureaucracy ever bothered to make it official. 52. Nashville's black community refused to accept segregation quietly and built their own alternative instead of simply protesting. In 1905, the city segregated its streetcars, prompting a determined boycott from black residents who refused to ride them anymore. Rather than just walking away in frustration, organizers launched their own transportation company called Union Transportation to serve the community directly. That bold response meant riders no longer depended on a system designed to humiliate them every single day. The boycott demonstrated organized economic resistance decades before similar protests became widely recognized across the country. Nashville's streetcar boycott quietly became an early blueprint for civil rights activism nationwide. 53. A university founded in Nashville opened doors that had been slammed shut for black students across the entire state. Tennessee. State University was established in 1912, becoming one of the very first public universities open to black students. Students who had been denied access to higher education elsewhere finally found a place built specifically to welcome them. The university grew steadily, producing generations of graduates who went on to shape careers across countless different fields. Its founding represented a direct challenge to a system designed to keep opportunity locked away from entire communities. Nashville helped open a door that education had kept firmly closed for far too long. 54. One of Nashville's oldest surviving homes has quietly watched the entire city grow up around it. Travelers Rest was built in the 1790s, making it one of the oldest houses still standing anywhere in Nashville today. The home has survived wars, economic upheavals, and centuries of change, while newer buildings rose and fell around it repeatedly. Visitors touring its rooms today are walking through spaces that existed before Nashville even became an official incorporated city. Its wooden floors and walls have quietly outlasted generations of residents who came and went over the decades. Nashville's history is still standing in this remarkably preserved 18th century home. 55. Nashville's wooden downtown kept catching fire until the city finally learned its lesson the hard way. Throughout the 1800s, repeated fires swept through the mostly wooden buildings that made up early downtown Nashville. Business owners watched their properties burn again and again, forcing the city to rethink its entire approach to construction materials. Eventually, officials pushed for brick and stone buildings instead, recognizing that wood simply could not survive the city's fiery track record. That shift permanently changed the appearance of downtown Nashville, giving it the sturdier look still visible in older buildings today. Nashville essentially rebuilt itself in fireproof materials after learning the same lesson over and over again. 56. Country music was not always called country, and Nashville radio proved it decades before the polished label stuck. Early broadcasts referred to the genre as hillbilly music, long before anyone rebranded it into something more marketable. Performers played the same twangy rural sound that later became beloved, but under a name many considered dismissive and crude. Radio stations gradually shifted their language as the genre gained mainstream popularity, and record labels wanted a cleaner image. Eventually, hillbilly faded away, entirely replaced by the smoother, more commercially friendly term country music that stuck permanently. Nashville watched an entire genre rebrand itself right there on the airwaves. 57. A Nashville neighborhood now filled with shops and lofts, once built cars few people remember existed at all. Marathon Village occupies a former early 1900s factory that produced one of the first automobiles ever manufactured entirely in the American South. Workers assembled these early vehicles inside a building that has since been completely repurposed for modern retail and living spaces. Few visitors browsing the trendy shops today realize they are standing inside what was once a pioneering automotive factory. That forgotten chapter of Southern car manufacturing quietly faded while the building itself found an entirely new purpose. Nashville turned a forgotten car factory into one of its trendiest modern neighborhoods. 58. A Nashville medical school opened its doors to black students decades before most Southern institutions would even consider it. Meharry Medical College was founded in 1876, training generations of black doctors and nurses who had nowhere else to turn. While other medical schools across the South refused admission based purely on race, Meharry built an entirely different path forward. Its graduates went on to serve communities that otherwise would have had little to no access to trained medical professionals. The college became a cornerstone of black medical education long before the rest of the region caught up. Nashville helped train the doctors that segregation elsewhere refused to allow. 59. Nashville's Belmont Mansion was built by a woman wealthy enough to make most modern millionaires look modest by comparison. Adelicia Ackland constructed the mansion in the 1850s as her summer home, reportedly becoming one of the wealthiest women in antebellum America. Her fortune funded lavish gardens, greenhouses, and art collections that turned the property into a showcase of extravagant Southern wealth. Visitors touring the mansion today walk through rooms designed to display just how much money one woman could accumulate. Her story offers a rare glimpse into female wealth and power during an era that rarely allowed either. Nashville's Belmont Mansion still stands as a monument to one woman's extraordinary fortune. 60. Nashville's entire music industry grew out of ordinary houses rather than any grand corporate headquarters. Music Row developed from small home studios scattered across residential streets, rather than a deliberately planned industry district from the start. Producers and musicians simply set up recording equipment inside regular houses, turning quiet neighborhoods into unexpected creative hubs, almost by accident. Over time, those humble home studios multiplied until the area organically transformed into the beating heart of the country music business. What started as informal recording sessions eventually became one of the most famous music industry districts in the entire world. Nashville's biggest industry began in living rooms rather than boardrooms. 61. Nashville waited over a century after statehood to finally build a park celebrating the occasion properly. Bicentennial Capitol Mall. State Park was constructed specifically to mark Tennessee's 200th anniversary as an official state. Designers packed the park with historical markers, fountains and monuments meant to walk visitors through the state's entire timeline. It gave Nashville a dedicated space for reflecting on state history rather than folding it quietly into existing older landmarks. The park's late arrival did not stop it from becoming one of the city's most popular gathering spots. Nashville eventually got its history lesson carved directly into stone and water features. 62. A Nashville pedestrian bridge started out carrying streetcars and wagons rather than joggers and tourists. The John Seigenthaler Pedestrian Bridge began construction in 1909, originally designed for streetcar and wagon crossings over the Cumberland River. Decades of changing transportation needs eventually transformed its original purpose into something completely different from what its builders imagined. Today, pedestrians and cyclists casually cross the same structure that once groaned under the weight of horse-drawn wagons. Few people strolling across it realize they are walking over more than a century of transportation history. Nashville quietly repurposed an old workhorse bridge into a beloved modern walkway. 63. A Tennessee statesman helped build an international organization after cutting his teeth in Nashville's political circles. Cordell Hull rose through the same local political networks that shaped early Nashville, before eventually reaching the national stage entirely. His career eventually led him to help found the United Nations, earning him a legacy far beyond his home state. Few realize the political groundwork for that global achievement was laid partly among the same circles running early Nashville politics. His journey from local politics to international diplomacy traced back to relationships built long before anyone predicted his future. Nashville quietly helped shape one of the architects behind a major global institution. 64. Long before railroads ever reached Nashville, the city's entire economy floated quite literally down the Cumberland River. Flatboats hauled goods and supplies along the river, serving as the primary economic lifeline for the growing frontier settlement. Farmers and merchants depended entirely on these boats to move crops, livestock, and manufactured goods to distant markets downstream. That river-based economy shaped daily life for decades before any railroad tracks were ever laid anywhere near the city. Nashville grew and thrived, using little more than boats, rivers, and sheer determination to keep commerce moving forward. The city's economic foundation was built on water long before it ever ran on rails. 65. One of the Civil War's largest inland forts was built largely by people who had no choice in the matter. Fort Negley rose as one of the war's biggest stone forts, constructed mostly through forced labor from enslaved and conscripted black workers. These laborers endured brutal conditions building fortifications meant to defend a city that offered them little in return for their effort. The finished structure helped secure Nashville militarily while standing as a lasting symbol of the exploitation required to build it. Visitors today walking the fort's grounds confront a history far heavier than the stone walls themselves suggest. Nashville's wartime defenses were built on labor. History often leaves out entirely. 66. A blind street musician performing for spare change on Nashville sidewalks ended up winning one of music's biggest honors. Cortelia Clark spent years playing blues on downtown corners, barely earning enough to survive despite his obvious raw talent. Somehow his recorded performances caught the attention of the recording industry, leading to an unexpected nomination for national recognition. In 1968, he won a Grammy Award for Best Folk Recording, stunning almost everyone who had walked past him unnoticed for years. The man who once played for pocket change suddenly found himself holding one of music's most prestigious awards. Nashville's sidewalks once hosted a Grammy winner nobody bothered to notice until it was almost too late. 67. Songwriters from around the entire world quietly flocked to Nashville for one massive annual celebration of their craft. The city hosts the country's largest annual songwriting festival, drawing talent from far beyond the borders of Tennessee itself. Writers gather to share, collaborate, and showcase original material in a city practically built on the backbone of songwriting. For a few days, Nashville becomes an even more concentrated hub of creative talent than its already famous reputation suggests. The festival reinforces Music City's identity as more than just a performance destination, but a true songwriting capital. Nashville proves its music industry runs on writers just as much as performers. 68. Nashville's Two Rivers Mansion once anchored one of the largest antebellum farming estates anywhere in Middle Tennessee. Built in 1859, the Italianate villa served as the centerpiece of a sprawling agricultural operation that dominated the surrounding landscape. Its elegant architecture stood in sharp contrast to the grueling farm labor required to sustain the massive estate surrounding the mansion itself. Over time, the property transitioned away from farming, eventually becoming a preserved historic site open for public visits and events. Visitors touring the mansion today walk through rooms that once oversaw one of the region's largest farming operations. Nashville's Two Rivers Mansion still stands as a monument to that vanished agricultural empire. 69. Nashville's justice system stayed officially segregated for far longer than most people probably assume today. Police departments and jail facilities across the city remained legally segregated well into the 20th century, despite growing pressure for change. Black residents faced separate and often harsher treatment within a system explicitly designed to keep segregation intact at every level. That institutional segregation persisted stubbornly, even as civil rights activism gained momentum throughout other parts of the city and country. Reform came slowly, and only after sustained pressure forced officials to finally dismantle these deeply entrenched, segregated systems. Nashville's justice system took far too long to catch up with basic fairness. 70. Jack White turned an old Nashville record shop into a strange little factory for instant vinyl memories. Third Man. Records presses live performances straight to vinyl on the spot, selling copies exclusively to the audience inside the room. Fans who attend these shows walk away holding a physical record of a performance that only a handful of people ever witnessed. No mass production and no wide release, just a tiny batch of vinyl, capturing one unrepeatable night of music. That approach turned ordinary concerts into strangely exclusive collectible experiences unavailable anywhere else in the world. Nashville's Third Man Records made vinyl feel personal again in the most literal way possible. 71. Nashville's oldest indoor shopping passage, still standing today, borrowed its entire concept from across the Atlantic Ocean. The downtown arcade, built in 1903, was modeled directly after elegant European shopping galleries popular in cities like Milan and Paris. Shoppers, strolling beneath its glass ceiling and iron framework, experienced something that felt more European than typical American frontier commerce. It remains one of the oldest indoor shopping passages anywhere in the entire South, still operating in something close to its original form. Generations of Nashvillians have wandered through its narrow corridor without necessarily realizing its unusual European architectural inspiration. Nashville quietly imported a piece of European elegance long before anyone called it retail therapy. 71 facts deep, and Nashville still is not putting any of this on a postcard. Cheetahs Band. Hot chicken born from pure revenge. A city named after a man who never once visited, a president who ran Nicaragua, a blind street musician who won a Grammy nobody saw coming. Polar bear statues that keep vanishing across the city for almost a century. Which one messed with your head the most? Drop it in the comments right now. Hit subscribe and smash that like button, because Dumbest Things is only just getting started.